The day I stopped a storm with just 3 words. I was asleep when they screamed my name. They thought the sea would swallow them alive. I remember the day clearly. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. We had spent the day on the eastern shore, a long day of teaching, of healing, of listening to the countless stories of people in need. My body was weary, but my spirit was full. As we pushed the small fishing boat away from the shore, a gentle breeze filled our sail. The waves were calm, a soft rhythm against the hull. The disciples, tired from the day's work, were talking quietly amongst themselves, their voices a low murmur. I lay down on a cushion in the stern, the rocking of the boat a soothing lullaby. As I closed my eyes, I felt a deep peace settle over me. The world was quiet, and for a moment, I was simply a man on a boat, resting with my friends. The day had been a long one, filled with the kind of human stories that are both heavy and beautiful. We had been in a busy village, a place where the sick were brought to me, and the curious pressed in close to hear what I had to say. I remember the face of a young boy, his eyes filled with a feverish light, and the touch of his small hand as I laid mine upon him. I remember the worn hands of an old woman, crippled by years of toil and pain, who simply reached out to touch the hem of my garment, believing with a faith that needed no words. I remember the crowd, a sea of faces, some hopeful, some skeptical, all searching for something, a word of hope, a touch of healing, a sign that there was something more than the struggle of their daily lives. I had spoken to them about the kingdom of God, using stories of seeds and soil, of hidden treasure, of pearls of great price. These were not complex ideas, but simple truths meant to take root in their hearts. The parables were like small, carefully crafted keys, designed to unlock a deeper understanding within them, if they were only willing to turn the key. I watched their faces as I spoke, seeing the light of comprehension dawn in some, and the blank stare of confusion in others. But I knew that the words, once planted, would do their work. Now, as we moved out onto the water, the day's work was behind us. The clamor of the crowd was a fading echo. The shouts, the pleas, the constant press of people, it all receded into the gentle silence of the sea. The air was cool and clean, washing away the dust and heat of the day. My friends, Peter, James, and John, were in the front of the boat, their fishing nets neatly stowed, their conversation low and easy. I could hear Peter's robust laugh and John's more thoughtful, quieter tone. They spoke of the day, of the people they had seen, of the things I had said. They were trying to make sense of it all, to piece together the divine puzzle I was laying out for them, one piece at a time. They were men of the sea, men of the earth, men who understood the rhythm of seasons and the hard work of pulling in a catch. They were learning a new kind of rhythm now, one of patience and faith, of listening and seeing with new eyes. Andrew and Philip were there, too, and Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew. All of them a mosaic of personalities, a family knit together by a shared purpose. They were still learning to be a family, to trust one another, to understand that their unique differences were not a source of division, but a strength. I lay there, listening to the gentle lapping of the water and the low rumble of their voices, a deep sense of contentment filling me. This was a moment of peace, a breath between the demands of the world. It was a time for quiet reflection and simple rest. My human body needed it, and so did theirs. The cushion under my head was soft, and the rhythmic sway of the boat was a perfect melody for weary limbs and a quiet mind. I closed my eyes, but my senses were still awake to the world around me. I could feel the gentle breeze on my skin, the subtle shift in the boat's balance, the distant cry of a seagull. I was a part of this world, a part of this scene, a man taking a moment to simply be. And in that moment, I was filled with a deep and abiding love for these men, my friends, my brothers. They were imperfect, often slow to understand, but their hearts were true. They had left everything to follow me, and for that, my heart was full. The peace I felt was not just a physical weariness finding rest, but a deeper, more profound stillness that came from my Father. It was the calm at the center of the storm, a stillness that was always available to me, a well of living water that could never run dry. I knew that soon, the journey would continue, the challenges would return, and the needs of the world would once again press in. But for now, in this quiet boat on a tranquil sea, there was only peace. It was a peace so complete, so profound, that it lulled me into a deep sleep. I was completely at rest, trusting in the Father and in the quiet order of the world He had made. I was a man asleep on a boat, and in that sleep, I was one with the stillness that pervaded all things. This was the last I would know of that gentle peace for some time. For the world, I knew, was a place of storms, and the sea was about to show us one of its own. But the silence didn't last. The gentle breeze that had filled our sail and caressed our faces began to change. It was a subtle shift at first, so slight that it might have been missed by a less seasoned sailor. I was still deep in slumber, but even in my rest, I felt the change in the air. The boat, which had been rocking with a gentle hypnotic rhythm, now began to move with a more hurried, urgent motion. The soft murmur of the waves against the hull became a choppy slap, a sound that was less of a lullaby and more of a warning. I could feel the change in temperature as well. The air, which had been warm and still from the day's sun, now grew cold. It was the kind of cold that carries with it the promise of rain, a damp chill that settles deep in your bones. The whispers of the disciples in the bow of the boat, which had been a low and easy hum, now turned into hurried, anxious words. I could hear Peter's voice, no longer full of easy laughter, but with a sharp edge of concern. He was a fisherman, a man who knew the sea in all its moods, and I knew that if Peter was concerned, there was a reason. Then, the first gust hit. It wasn't just a sudden rush of air, but a push, a shove that tilted the boat and sent a shiver through its frame. The canvas of our small sail, which had been full and billowing just moments before, now flapped wildly, struggling against a new, unseen force. I heard one of the disciples shout, a sharp command to bring the sail down, and the quick, practiced movements of the others as they wrestled with the ropes. This was no longer a pleasant voyage. It was a struggle against an emerging will of nature. The darkness, which had been a slow and gentle descent of evening, now fell with a sudden, oppressive weight. It was as if a heavy curtain had been pulled across the sky. The stars, which had just begun to peek through the twilight, vanished completely. The moon, a crescent of silver just a moment ago, was swallowed by a roiling mass of black. I could still sense the world around me, even in my sleep. The air became thick with moisture and the scent of the sea, not the clean salt air of a pleasant day, but the metallic, raw smell of a storm brewing. And then the rain began, not as a gentle sprinkle, but as a hard, stinging assault. The drops were cold and heavy, hitting the surface of the water with a sound like 1,000 tiny needles. The sea itself, once a mirror of the sky, was now a choppy, angry mess of whitecaps and foam. The boat, which had been moving steadily, now bucked and tossed like a wild horse. It was an unsettling, violent motion, one that could not be ignored. I could hear the fear in their voices now. Their low, anxious whispers had turned to louder, more desperate shouts as they struggled to keep the boat stable. "Hold on," one of them yelled. "Bring in the lines. The waves are coming over the side." Another cry of alarm, and I could hear the sound of water rushing into the vessel. This was not a storm they were prepared for. This was something different, something that was growing in intensity with every passing second. Even in my sleep, I could feel the cold of the water as it splashed into the boat, reaching the cushion where my head lay. The rocking became a violent jolt, a lurch that threw the boat from side to side. The sound of the wind, once a gentle breeze, was now a high-pitched wail, a sound of fury and raw power. It was a roar that seemed to speak a language of its own, a promise of devastation. I could feel their fear, a palpable thing in the air around me. These were not men who were strangers to danger. They had faced storms before, but this one was different. This one had an anger to it, a sudden and violent rage that seemed to come from nowhere. They were seasoned fishermen, men of courage, but the force of this tempest was beyond their experience. They were losing control, and the boat, their safe haven, was becoming a cage. In my slumber, I felt the boat lurch again, a violent motion that sent me sliding. I could hear the sound of their panic, the desperate, ragged breaths, the shouts for help. They were no longer just worried. They were terrified. They saw not just a storm, but a watery grave opening up beneath them. They saw the end of their journey, and the end of their lives, in the darkness and the fury of the waves. It was in this moment, as the boat was being tossed about like a toy, that I felt a deep sense of compassion for them. I was still at peace, the quiet wellspring within me untouched by the chaos. But I could feel their fear, their raw humanity, their belief that they were alone in this. They were trying to fight a battle that could not be won with their own strength. They were looking at a power that was beyond them, and they were crying out in their hearts for someone, for something to save them. And so, the quiet moments of peace ended. The lullaby of the calm sea gave way to the deafening roar of the storm, and the serene quiet of my rest was about to be broken by a cry that held within it all the fear and desperation of men who had come to the end of their hope. The crack had widened into a chasm, and the ordinary journey had become a matter of life and death. The quiet rest was over. The gentle lapping of waves was now a thunderous crash, the rhythmic sway of the boat a violent lurch. The cushion I was resting on, once a pillow of comfort, was soaked with cold sea water. It was then that I was jolted awake, not by the storm's fury, but by the sheer, unadulterated terror in their voices. They were screaming my name. "Master! Wake up!" they cried, their voices raw and desperate, cutting through the wail of the wind. I opened my eyes to a scene of absolute chaos. The boat was a small, fragile toy being tossed about in a colossal, angry bathtub. Waves, like angry, hungry beasts, crashed over the sides, filling the vessel with water. The sail was shredded, flapping uselessly in the gale, and the ropes were flying about, a tangle of futility. My friends, these men who had faced storms 100 times before, men of the sea, men of strength, were undone. Their faces were ashen, slick with rain and spray, their eyes wide with a fear I had never seen in them before. They weren't just worried, they were convinced that this was the end. They were bailing water with everything they had, but it was a losing battle. The sea was winning, and they knew it. "Don't you care that we are perishing?" one of them shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. It was a cry not just of panic, but of betrayal. In their fear, they saw me as a man who had abandoned them, a friend who was sleeping while they faced their death. They couldn't reconcile the peace they saw in me with the turmoil they felt within themselves. They were looking at the end of all things, and I was asleep. I sat up, the boat lurching and tilting violently under me. I looked at their faces, at the desperation in their eyes. I saw Peter, his face a mask of frantic effort as he tried to secure a flapping rope. I saw John, his usual thoughtful expression replaced by a look of sheer panic. They weren't just fighting the storm anymore, they were fighting for their lives. The fear they felt wasn't just about the physical danger, it was a deeper, more primal fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being swallowed by a power they could not understand or control. I looked from their terrified faces to the raging sea, to the sky that was a black, churning cauldron. It was a spectacle of raw power, a force that seemed to mock their small, human efforts. But in that moment, I wasn't just a man on a boat. I was the calm center of the storm. My heart ached for them, for their terror and their lack of faith, but my spirit was a well of perfect peace. I was awake, and I was present. The moment was a turning point. It was the moment they reached the absolute limit of their own strength. They had tried everything they knew, but the storm was beyond them. They had reached their breaking point, and in their last, desperate act, they turned to me. Their words echoed in the roar of the wind. "Master, we're going to drown. Do something." The boat was about to go under. It was no longer a question of if, but when. And in that final, terrifying moment, they surrendered their own will and their own power. They placed their last hope in me, the man who was asleep in the stern, the man who they had just accused of not caring. And as I stood up, with the water swirling around my feet and the wind whipping my hair, I looked at the storm, and I knew what had to be done. The time for human effort was over. The time for faith had begun. I stood up, the boat lurching violently beneath my feet. The cold, salty water swirled around my ankles, a stark reminder of the peril we were in. The wind howled like 1,000 wild animals, and the waves crashed over the sides with a force that seemed determined to tear the boat apart. My friends, my disciples, were on their knees, soaked and terrified, their frantic efforts to save the boat now at a complete standstill. Their faces, pale in the flashing of the lightning, were turned toward me, a mix of desperation and a last, faint glimmer of hope. And in that moment, I felt it. The roar of the storm was not just a sound, it was a presence, a raw, untamed power that seemed to defy the very order of the world. But it was not a power that was separate from me. I felt its fury, its chaotic energy, but I also felt the deeper, more profound stillness that lay beneath it all. The storm was a part of the creation, and the creation was a part of me. I was not a man facing a storm. I was the son of the one who had spoken the sea into existence. I looked at the water, at the roiling, violent waves. I looked at the sky, at the black, churning clouds that blotted out the stars. And then, I spoke. My voice was not a shout. It was not a plea. It was a calm, steady word spoken from the very center of peace. My words were a command, an absolute declaration of authority that cut through the deafening roar of the storm. Peace, be still. And in that instant, a silence fell. It wasn't a gradual fading of the wind, or a slow dying down of the waves. It was an immediate, absolute cessation. The wind, which had been howling with the fury of 1,000 demons, simply stopped. The violent waves, which had been crashing and foaming with a destructive rage, flattened out into a perfectly still, glassy surface. The rain, which had been a stinging assault, stopped mid-air, as if it had been frozen in time. The black clouds parted, not with a slow drift, but with a sudden, sweeping motion, revealing the moon, full and serene, and a sky filled with a scattering of brilliant stars. The boat, which had been on the verge of capsizing, was now floating gently on a calm sea. The sudden, absolute stillness was more shocking, more terrifying in its own way, than the storm itself. My disciples were frozen. They had been in the midst of a battle for their lives, their hearts pounding with terror, their bodies exhausted from the struggle. And now, in a single, impossible moment, all of it was gone. The chaos, the fear, the noise, it had all vanished, replaced by a deep and profound quiet. The only sound was the drip of water from the sides of the boat, and the ragged breathing of the men who had just been sure they were about to drown. They looked at me, their faces a mixture of awe, confusion, and a newfound terror. They had just seen the man they knew as Jesus, their friend and teacher, command the very forces of nature. They had seen me speak to the storm as if it were a disobedient child, and the storm had obeyed. They didn't know what to make of it. They had believed in me as a healer, a wise teacher, a man of God. But this was something else entirely. This was a glimpse into a power that was not just from God, but that was God. They were speechless, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The storm was gone. The sea was still. The world was quiet. And it had all been done with just 3 words. I looked at them, not with judgment, but with a gentle, loving gaze. They had asked me, "Don't you care that we are perishing?" And now, they had their answer. I had not cared that the storm was raging. I had cared that their hearts were filled with fear. And I had shown them that the peace I possessed was not just a state of mind, but a power that could silence the world. The shift was not just in the weather, it was in their understanding of who I was. It was a shift from fear to awe, from desperation to a profound and unsettling wonder. And in the silence, a new question began to form in their minds. A question that was far more important than the one they had asked me in their panic. It was a question that would change them forever. The silence that followed my words was profound, a stillness that had never been heard before. It was not just the absence of sound, but the presence of an overwhelming peace. My disciples, who just moments ago were consumed by terror, now stood in a stunned, silent awe. They were looking at the calm sea, at the moonlit sky, and then at me, their faces a mixture of wonder and fear. I looked at them, and my heart filled with a deep and tender compassion. Their question, "Don't you care that we are perishing?" was no longer just a desperate cry. It was a question that echoed in the heart of every person who has ever faced a storm they could not control. It was the question of humanity to the divine. Are you there? Do you see me? Do you care? And so, in the quiet of that boat, with the water now a mirror of the stars, I had to answer that question. Not just with a miracle, but with a lesson. Why are you so afraid? I asked them, my voice soft but clear in the silence. It was not a rebuke, but an invitation. I wanted them to look inward, to examine the roots of their fear. They were men of the sea, men who knew its dangers. This was not their first storm. But their fear was not just of the wind and the waves. Their fear was a lack of trust in the one who was in the boat with them. I continued, my gaze moving from one face to the next. Do you still have no faith? This was the true purpose of the storm. The storm was not a punishment, but a classroom. The chaos was a lesson in faith. They had seen me heal the sick, cast out demons, and teach with a wisdom that had never been heard before. But all of those miracles had been on land. This was a new test. This was about whether their faith was in the miracles, or in the one who performed them. I knew the storm was coming when we set out. I am not a man who is caught by surprise. I had a purpose in letting the tempest rage. I let the storm grow to its full, terrifying power so that they would come to the end of their own strength. So that they would see that their nets, their strength, their experience, all of it was useless in the face of a true force of nature. I wanted them to realize that there are storms in life that cannot be bailed out with human hands. The storms of life will come. Sickness will strike, relationships will break, and the world will throw challenges at you that are beyond your control. And in those moments, you will feel just as they felt in that boat, terrified, hopeless, and alone. You will cry out, Lord, don't you care? The answer, my friends, is yes. I care more than you can possibly imagine. But the purpose of the storm is not to show you that I can stop it. The purpose of the storm is to show you that I am in the boat with you. The purpose is to teach you that the peace you seek is not in the absence of the storm, but in the presence of the Master. The miracle was not just about the wind and the waves. The miracle was in the hearts of my disciples. It was a lesson in trust. I was there, sleeping, not because I was unaware, but because I was at perfect peace. I knew that the boat would reach the other side. My faith in my Father was absolute. The storm did not shake me, but it shook them, and in that shaking, they were being prepared. They were being prepared to be a rock, a foundation for my church. They were being prepared to face storms that would be far greater than this one, and to do so with the peace that I had just demonstrated. The true lesson of the sea that day was this. You will face things in your life that you cannot fix, situations you cannot control, and fears that you cannot quiet. And in those moments, I am not asking you to have a strong faith in your own ability. I am asking you to have faith in my presence. I am asking you to trust that even when it looks like I am asleep, I am in the boat. And I am asking you to remember that the same voice that stilled the sea can speak peace to the chaos in your own heart. They were left in stunned silence, their fear replaced by a question that was far more powerful than the storm itself. They looked at me, then at each other, their minds reeling from what they had just witnessed. It wasn't just that the storm had stopped, it was the way it had stopped. It was the authority in my voice, the calm that had commanded the chaos. They began to whisper to one another, their voices hushed and filled with a new kind of fear, the fear of the holy, the fear of the unknown. Who then is this? They asked, their words a question that hung in the still night air, that even the wind and the sea obey him. That question, my friends, is the heart of the matter. It is the question that I want you to carry with you. They had seen me as a teacher, a healer, a friend. But in that boat, on that wild sea, they saw a glimpse of something more. They saw the divine in the human. They saw the authority of the Son of God over the very elements he had created. I want you to know the answer to that question. The one who spoke peace to the sea is the same one who is in the boat of your life. The same one who stilled the tempest on the Sea of Galilee is the one who can bring peace to the storms in your own heart. He is the one who knows your deepest fears and your greatest struggles. He is the one who never leaves you, even when it feels like he is asleep. The greatest truth they learned that day was not about the power of a miracle, but about the nature of the miraculous one. They learned that the same voice that spoke to the wind and the waves can speak to the chaos in your soul. They learned that the same peace I carried within me is available to you, not as a reward for a life without storms, but as an anchor in the midst of them. So when the storms of your life come, and they will come, remember the disciples in that boat. Remember their fear, and remember their ultimate surrender. And when you are at your breaking point, and you feel as though you are perishing, remember that you are not alone. Remember that in your boat, too, there is a presence. For on that day, they learned a truth that would stay with them forever. A truth that would carry them through every challenge, every persecution, and every trial that lay ahead. They learned that even the winds knew my voice. And so do the storms of your own life. A quiet word to a weary heart. My child, sit with me for a moment. Just for a moment, let the world's noise fade and listen. Do you feel the gentle stillness in this space? That is my gift to you, always available, always waiting. I see the weariness in your soul, the burdens you carry as if they were your own flesh and bone. I see the hurried pace of your days, the endless to-do lists, the constant stream of worries that whisper in your mind like a restless wind. I see the moments you feel alone, the times you question your worth, and the scars on your heart from words and deeds that were not kind. I want you to know, with a certainty that nothing can shake, that you are deeply, profoundly loved. Your value is not measured by what you accomplish, how many people you please, or how perfectly you live. It is a simple, eternal truth. You are my beloved. I created you with intentionality, with a purpose woven into the very fabric of your being. The unique way you see the world, the quiet kindness in your heart, the strength you find when you think you have none, these are all a reflection of my love for you. Do not let the world tell you otherwise. I see how you struggle with the voice of fear. It is a powerful one, isn't it? It whispers of past failures and future uncertainties. It tells you that you are not enough, that you are a mistake, and that your hope is misplaced. But I want you to remember this. That voice is not from me. My voice is one of peace, of grace, of gentle encouragement. When you hear the voice of fear, do not wrestle with it. Do not argue with it. Instead, turn your ear to me. My love casts out fear. It is a light so bright that the shadows of worry cannot stand against it. I know you are often striving for perfection, trying to get everything just right. You work hard to be a good friend, a loving parent, a dutiful child, a successful worker. And in this striving, you often forget to simply be. You forget to rest. Rest, my child, is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It is in the quiet moments of rest that I can speak to you most clearly. It is in those moments that you can feel my peace settle over you like a warm blanket. You do not need to earn my love or my rest. They are free gifts, given without condition. When your mind is racing and your body is weary, I am asking you to lay it all down at my feet. Let me carry it for a while. It is not too heavy for me. And when you fail, and you will, for you are human, do not hide from me. Do not let shame build a wall between us. Shame is a heavy chain, and I have come to set you free. I have known your every mistake, your every failing, long before it ever happened, and my love for you has not wavered. My grace is not a reward for good behavior, it is a gift for all hearts that are willing to receive it. When you fall, do not despair. Get up, dust yourself off, and come back to me. I will always be waiting with open arms, not to condemn, but to forgive and restore. I want to talk to you about the little things. You often think that I am only concerned with the big, dramatic moments of your life. The crises, the grand decisions, the profound sorrows. But I am in the little things, too. I am in the quiet joy you feel when the sun touches your face. I am in the kindness of a stranger's smile. I am in the beauty of a flower, the comfort of a warm meal, and the shared laughter with a friend. These are not coincidences, they are little love notes from me to you, reminding you that I am here. Be present in these moments. See the grace in the small things. It is in these details that the tapestry of a beautiful life is woven. My beloved, a part of you feels broken. There are wounds that have not healed, dreams that have been shattered, and hopes that have turned to dust. I do not ask you to forget your pain or to pretend it does not exist. Instead, I ask you to bring it to me. Bring your brokenness to my healing hands. I do not just mend the broken pieces. I make them into something new, something beautiful, something stronger than they were before. I promise you, my work in your life is not finished. The story of your life is still being written, and it is a story of redemption, of grace, and of love. Remember the peace I gave my disciples in the storm? The kind of peace that can silence the wind and the waves? That peace is for you. It is a peace that the world cannot give, and a peace that the world cannot take away. It is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of my Spirit in the midst of it. When the storms of life rage around you, when the fear is deafening and the waves of doubt threaten to overwhelm you, do not look at the storm. Look at me. Keep your eyes on me, and you will find your footing. You will find a stillness that no chaos can disturb. So go on, my child. Go on into your day with this truth held close to your heart. You are not alone. I am with you always, in every breath you take, in every step you make. Rest in my love. Walk in my grace. And know that the story I am writing for you is one of hope, of healing, and of an eternal, unconditional love. Will you carry this peace with you today?